Hello and welcome to another video on chart calculations on the Astrology practice website. So in this video I want to talk a bit about what I've called Crowley's master key to astrology. So this calculation method actually is coming from the book The General Principles of Astrology, that has been co-written by Evangeline Adams and Aleister Crowley. They're both two very interesting characters, and I'm still quite surprised that the two are friends. Evangeline Adams is an astrologer who was quite famous. I forgot from what period she's coming from. Was it the 40s, something like that? Um, I don't really remember exactly, but she's quite famous. She's known, uh, f- anecdotically known to be JP Morgan's astrologer. We don't know if she actually worked for JP Morgan, but she did seem to know what his birth time is. I think she published it at some point, and there is a quote that is being attributed to Evangeline Adams by JP Morgan, who says something along the lines of millionaires don't use astrologers, but billionaires do. I don't know if that quote actually belongs to JP Morgan, but um, Evangeline Adams is known in relation to him. She's also known for having practiced astrology in New York for a long time and having been sued for it, because I think at the time you practicing astrology was illegal. Fortune telling, astrology, they were illegal practices back then, and this is an actual fact, I believe, from Evangeline Adams's life. She supposedly impressed the judge that um, that was judging her case with the charges of fortune telling brought against her. She impressed the judge by doing the chart for his son, or he maybe did the chart. Maybe she did the chart for him or his son or something like that, and he was very impressed by her skill, and all the charges were dropped. She was indeed a very good astrologer. She produced quite a few books on astrology, and she allegedly co-wrote this book with Aleister Crowley, and they had a lot of conflict in the making of the book. I think this method belongs to Crowley. I'm not too sure if it belongs to Evangeline Adams. I've seen this method before in other books, so I think um, even in the very first astrology books that I was reading years ago by Joan McEvers and Marion D. March, even those books may have mentioned that if you have a chart that has very tight aspects, it probably shows that the individual, the native, um, has a very strong personality, and they're gonna leave their mark in the world in a certain way. They're gonna leave something behind, something notable behind. And this is pretty much what this calculation method is trying to do. So, like for any other astrological work, you need a name, you need a birth date, a birth time, and a birthplace. For this example, I chose Beyonce. This method is gonna calculate by Crowley's original thinking. You will look at the seven traditional planets, including Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, um, and it will look at the five Ptolemaic aspects, so the conjunction, the sextile, the square, the trine, and the opposition, plus the semi-sextile and the quincunx. So the 30-degree aspect and the 150-degree aspect. This is what Crowley is looking at, and this is what I'm calculating, and I'm calling Crowley's original method. If you calculate this, so again, I use Beyonce's chart. We have a very accurate birth time for her from her birth certificate. Here is the chart with the chart positions, and Crowley's master key method is pretty much calling her chart exceptional. And I think anybody who is familiar with who this person is can definitely say that her legacy will be huge, and she will leave something behind, and she will leave art and music that will probably survive for many years after. The master key is basically looking at all the planets in the chart, and it's trying to find a connection between them. And if all the planets in the chart, including Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, are forming, if they're interconnected by aspects within a small orb, that means that the person, the native, um, will have a pretty impressive legacy that they will leave behind. I think this is when I was reading the general principles of astrology, Crowley was saying that astrology should be able to tell you if a person will be relatively mediocre, as rude and unkind as that sounds to call a human being mediocre. But just from the objective perspective of the things that they're going to produce in the world and how many people their work will impact, or how many people they will impact, I'm assuming in a positive way. He was trying to find a method to tell, to check by if, can astrology tell us if somebody's chart is indicating that they will leave something behind in the world, that they'll do some work that is impactful enough to leave a notable legacy. And in this case, all the 10 planets are forming a complex within 5 degrees, 5 and 50 minutes. Crowley seems to look at quite generous orbs. He even mentions quite a few famous people that have orbs up to 15 degrees, but obviously as low, the lower this number is, the lower the orb is, then the better the situation gets. I'm showing here the most separate planet for her, that is Saturn, which is forming a semi-sextile with the Sun within 3 degrees and 21 minutes. And I'm trying to formulate a sentence exactly as Crowley would put it, exactly as he described it in the book. So 3 planets are weaved within 3 degrees. That means 3 planets are making aspects with each other within a 3-degree orb. So a 3-degree orb means that if we have a trine between 2 planets, then those 2 planets are not more than 123 degrees or 117 degrees apart. So they're within a 3-degree orb. They're forming a trine with a 3-degree orb. That's what that means. Another 2 planets are forming an aspect within 5 degrees, and Saturn joins at 5 degrees and 50 minutes. So Saturn is the more separate part of the chart. I usually don't really look at semi-sextile and quincunx aspects. However, this method was thought in a different way, so I really recommend that people look at this method using Crowley's original method if you're interested in it, and if you want to look at different charts and rank them maybe and see which personality is stronger, which person has a better chance to leave an important legacy behind. Let's rank them. I would use his original method because that seems to be something that he looked into more carefully. I put in a modern experimental method because I usually look at Ptolemaic aspects only, which is something you can select here from the aspect set. I tend to see planets that are 30 degrees apart or 150 degrees apart as pretty much in aversion to each other. They don't really see each other. They can't really communicate, or they don't have an easy channel through which to exchange energy and through which to communicate and work together. So I'm not too sure why a semi-sextile and an inconjunct was considered by Crowley to be helpful, but he does so just to respect the original method, I would look at that. And also, I'm not too sure if the aspects between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto matter all that much, because they might be connected to your personal planets, And I've actually seen that many people who leave an important legacy behind and who create very important art, they usually have there is some relationship between their personal planets, so the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and one of the outer planets, so Uranus, Neptune, especially for artists. Neptune is important, and Pluto for people, I don't know, people who study depth psychology or Jungian analysts. I think Carl Jung had a Moon Pluto conjunction, people who go really deep into their psyche, right? They'll be dominated by Pluto. But I don't think it really matters for Uranus and Neptune to be in aspect to each other, or for Uranus and Pluto to make an aspect with each other. And if they don't, I don't think that's a negative. So that's why normally I use the 7 traditional planets. And you can even take this further and make it even more difficult to have an interwoven strong chart by looking at applying aspects only. It is up to you if you want to consider separating aspects or only applying aspects. I think if you consider only applying aspects, you'll be much more difficult to get a strong chart with this method. And I haven't done the research to see if that is gonna be more accurate or a more powerful method overall. But it is something, there to play with. So if we don't select the applying aspects and we calculate using the 7 traditional planets and only the Ptolemaic aspects of conjunction, sextile, square, trine, and opposition, we have a strong chart. It is called strong but qualified, right? Because the planets are within 10 degrees. And the Sun joins at 14 degrees and 17 minutes. So the Sun is quite separate, actually. And this is something that I have in my own chart as well. I think my Sun is 13 degrees or 14 degrees away from making an aspect with Jupiter. It is the most separate planet. But again, Crowley looked at many famous people and many notable people who've had charts that were interwoven with orbs within 15 degrees. So I think the 15 degree point is the cutoff. If you have a planet that's joining later than 15 degrees, usually that's considered pretty weak, and the interplay between the planets is broken from that point onward, according to his method. If we look at applying aspects only and we calculate the same thing, we have a nearly complete interwoven aspect because the Sun, again, is the most separate. It is making a square with the Moon, but the orb between them is 15 degrees and 43 minutes. So it is very close to that 15 degree cutoff, but it's not that tight. However, I still think it's pretty impressive because considering only applying aspects and only the 7 traditional planets and only Ptolemaic aspects without other minor aspects, you could play with this even more and add sesquiquadrates, which is the 135 degree orb, or quintiles, 72 degree orb aspects, or you can add the semi-square 45 degree aspects. I think those might be actually more important than a semi-sextile or a quincunx. That would be much more interesting. Maybe I'll implement that in the future, but for now you can still look at your chart in the way that I've described earlier. So this will pretty much give you a summary of, if you were to go to Aleister Crowley many years ago and get your chart interpreted, what would he think about your chart? What would he think about, the overall nature of your chart and planets and aspects and how they work together? Would you be considered somebody who has a chance to leave behind a significant, a notable legacy? This is pretty much it. Again, at the end, I add a disclaimer saying that any decisions you make are purely yours. You're encouraged to contact me directly for a booking or a consultation if you need any more details, and the condition of a planet is very difficult to judge just by computer-generated interpretation, and there are so many methods and so many modifiers and so many variables that we deal with. when judging the condition of one single planet, let alone the whole chart of an individual, of a human being. It gets extremely complicated and extremely complex. So yeah, you need to be careful to take all readings with a grain of salt. But this is pretty much it for Crowley's Master Key to Astrology. So again, this method is coming from the General Principles of Astrology, which I think is a pretty interesting book to read. It's pretty old, and some things in it are quite shocking. They might sound a little bit weird to the modern ear, especially the way Crowley is talking about race and how he associates some races with some particular signs that might sound a little bit out of place, but overall I think it's a pretty interesting book for students of astrology, because you just get another perspective of all the signs, of all the planets, of all the planets and signs and so on, and that's always useful. It's always useful to read and listen to what other astrologers have to say about signs and planets and houses and all the combination of those, because you will hear about the years of experience someone had and their perspective on it, and it will definitely improve and add to your practice of astrology. Yes, so thank you for watching this video.